And so please be patient, and you can write down your question, and both Mehmet and I will deal with it after both of us are done. So with that, I'm going to hit the share screen, and I will begin with my slides. And so I hope you all can see this screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the title of my talk is Novel Coronavirus COVID-19 in India. And I'll be dealing with the spread of the disease a little more in detail, and some on social, economic, and almost very little on political implications, because it is a little too early to go there. Maybe in a subsequent talk, I'll be able to draw some conclusions on the political implications. Some are obvious, but you can do that as well as I can. So with that, let me go to the next slide. And this next slide shows you India versus some countries in Europe, US and China, basically larger countries, or where there have been significant cases, a large number of cases. So on the left column is the country. The second column identifies when the first case was identified. And then the reported infections, they are the most current, which I think is April 18th, except for, I think, India and US, I got it this morning. So India probably is also 18. So pretty much this data, since the data is shifting almost hourly, assume this is the 18th unless I said otherwise. Next column is deaths, and then the recovered cases, number of cases that recovered. Now the first is China because it started there. Somewhere between November 17th and December 31st. I think the first case was locally identified November 17, but I think it was not, Chinese government did not declare it publicly until December 31. I think they were trying to figure it out. There was also the case of bureaucratic responsibility taking and who to blame, things like that, that delayed it, or technical reasons. So somewhere between November 17 and December 30, this case happens. Reported infections as of yesterday are 88,000 with 4,632 deaths, and recovered cases are almost all the rest. It's 82,589, very, very large number. So that's very significant in accomplishment, if true. There are some doubts about whether the deaths could be that low and the number of cases could be that low, but that's also true of other countries. Some other countries. In the US reported, okay, the first case was January 12th, and reported infections as of last night is, or almost this morning, 740,000. So it's almost 9 times that of China, even though the Chinese population is about 4 times that of the United States. So 9 times 4 is 36 to 1, enormous difference. Deaths are 38,000, almost 39,000, recovered cases 66,000. Now the number of reported infections are based on testing. So testing also, if you test less, there are fewer cases reported. And deaths also are questionable because unless you assign by examining that it was a case of death by coronavirus. So for example, if somebody has heart disease and the person dies with coronavirus, do you assign it to coronavirus or heart disease? Well, it should be assigned to coronavirus. Then there's a case of people dying in their homes. Like in New York, at the peak when they were reporting 800 cases of patients dying of coronavirus in the hospitals, there was an increased rate of death in the homes compared to a similar period a year ago. And if all of the difference were to be accounted for by coronavirus, then the New York case of deaths was about 25% higher. Instead of 800, it would have been 1,000. So all these figures are, you have to look at with some healthy skepticism. But in general, they do depict the picture. Spain, which is a country of less than 50 million, so Spain is about 2.5 times that of New York State in population, has the second largest number of reported infections. Number of deaths, 20,000, recovered to 77,000. Italy is another one heavily impacted, was in the news a lot. It has right next to Spain, 176,000, 23,277 deaths, and almost 45,000. Now, when you compare that to India, where the first case was reported January 30th, if you see Italy, Spain, and India reporting the first case almost about the same date, okay, end of January. Reported infections as of this morning I saw are 16,324. Once again, the testing is the very lower. I think they have less than 400,000 tests conducted in India so far. But 16,324, which is order of magnitude smaller than United States and these two other countries, right? Deaths are 536 so far. Okay, now that undoubtedly there are deaths in coronavirus that are not reported, but could it be tens or 20,000? I doubt it. So this shows that this disease has progressed somewhat considerably slowly in India for some reason. Recovered cases are also very small. In India, it is also not uniformly distributed. It is almost in all states. I think in India, just about, I don't think in all states, but just about all states. Then there is a final one, which is global, because it is a global pandemic. And the first case is that of China. If you take the official number, 31st of December, reported infections are about 2.3 million, 160,000 deaths. So that amounts to about 7.5% of those reported infections resulting in death. And it varies, the percentage of deaths varies. In the US, the number of deaths compared to that are about 5%, as you can see, right? And in Italy, for example, it's higher. So in India, it is low, but it is rising. The thing is, in India, the spread came a little later. And the source of spread in India is outside, just like every other country. First case comes from outside, and then it spreads. So here it is. This is coronavirus sources in India. So here, January 30th to February 3rd, the first 3 cases were reported in Kerala, which is the southernmost state of India. It's a small state. It has been traditionally, out of the 50, 60 years, let's say almost 70 years of independence, right? Sorry, it's 70 years, 47, so yeah, it's 73 years, okay? 47, yeah, 73 years, almost 73 years of independent India. Kerala has been ruled by either the communist or communist-led, multiple party alliance for almost 47 to 48 years, if I'm not mistaken. So it came with the students who Indian government brought back from Wuhan. Once they learned, they sent out airplanes and started bringing Indians from other countries that were afflicted. China was, of course, the first, and the first 3 cases came in Kerala. So I will discuss the case of Kerala a little bit later on. February 22nd, and those of you who watched Abhay Shukla's presentation today would have learned a great deal about the difference between Kerala and other states, particularly Maharashtra, where is Mumbai is located, western state of Maharashtra, Mumbai and Pune, these two cities which have become hotspots. So February 22nd were 22 cases in Jaipur, Rajasthan, which is north, well, sort of west of Delhi, slightly to the north. This state, Italian tourists, 14 Italian tourists were found to be positive, and they infected 8 Indian hotel employees who were serving them. So that's the next case that was discovered February 22nd, and March 12th was the first death of a 76-year-old man who had returned from Saudi Arabia after a Hajj pilgrimage. So that's the first case known of a person going to the Middle East. March 10 to 12, a Sikh preacher, a Sikh religious preacher, was returning from Italy, carried infections to a Sikh religious gathering in Anandpur Sahib in Punjab, and he infected 28 others. March 9 and 10, the Hindu festival of Holi, which, is played with colors and a lot of gatherings and merrymaking, generally, sometimes also hooliganism, was subdued in view of the COVID-19 fears. Most people complied to Modi's appeal on March 3rd to abandon the gatherings. But Hindu temples where tens of thousands of devotees went daily and continue to gather until March 19, 2020. They claimed they were checking the temperature of people coming in and advised people not to come if you have fever or coughing. But nevertheless, there are asymptomatic people. So I think that definitely was also a spreader, although there is not a case where you can prove anything there. But the fact that such large gatherings were happening in March, it has to be a spreader. March 15 was when the 100 cases were identified. They increased to 1,000 by March 28. March 13 to 15, a Muslim religious congregation called Tablighi Jamaat event in Delhi emerged as another spreader, where 9,000 missionaries in the congregation from various states of India, but the sources for COVID-19 were few in the 960 missionaries who came from foreign countries. So one thing is that they came from Malaysia and some other countries which were known to be hotspots. And it was also convenient for the media to blame because they were outsiders and also because they were Muslims, because there is a prejudice against Muslims thanks to BJP's campaign to capture power since 1990 thereabout, or even before 90, making an issue of the mosque in masjid or mosque in Ayodhya, which later on they organized to demolish illegally. And so anyway, as of April 16, in India, there were 4,291 cases, and there were something like 1,400, some cases were ascribed to this Jamaat gathering because those people went all over the country and they actually followed them. In other words, there is a case of, at that time, and it still is in India, they tracked people who had it and then they tracked the people who they came in contact. So in this case, this was a meticulous following. In the case of Hindu temples, there wasn't that. So this made it easier for the Muslims. Now, of course, these are just Jamaat people, and these are fundamental Muslims. They're not into Islamic political Islam. They actually are very philosophical and kind of talking about life 6 feet under the ground, so to speak, as somebody said. They're talking about whether when you're dead and something gets to your body, whether that does something to your spirit or whatever. Anyway, this happened, and then on 6th April in Mumbai, in one of Mumbai's for-profit hospital. And this whole thing about for-profit, private sector hospitals is a phenomenon that in India largely started after the neoliberal change in policy brought about by Congress-led government. It was a Congress government in 1989. So since that time, privatization of healthcare system began, although the public health is there, but they defunded it. So that's another factor. Anyway, at this hospital, 26 nurses and 3 doctors were found to have been infected with the virus. They put the COVID patient and non-COVID patient in the same room, and India is hot, so Bombay is sultry and hot. Air conditioning system helped spread it. So the hospital was temporarily shut down and declared a containment zone. Negligence of the hospital administration has been blamed for the infection. But right behind that is, of course, the profit motive, right? Because these are private things. The public hospitals didn't do that. There is not a record of public hospitals spreading it in India, even though they're badly funded and they're overcrowded because they're free. Okay, so this is the case of the coronavirus source, and it's spreading, initially spreading. I'll go back to a little bit on outline of the working class and the COVID-19. India's population is about 1.3 billion. Number of wage workers are about 540 million. Industrial workers are about 25%. This includes all types, small, medium, large industries. Large industries, very, very small percentage of industrial workers in large industries. Agricultural workers are 40%. Those are basically rural workers. Service workers, mostly urban, but also suburban, and they are about 5%. So between industrial workers and service workers are 60%. That's 324 million. And this, along with their dependents, and some have more dependents, others themselves are children. So they're dependent, but they're also workers. So I'm guessing somewhere 750 to 800 million people are living and working in conditions which are very poor and congested, where social distancing is either very difficult or nearly impossible. So in COVID, that is the great threat to India, is this condition. Okay, that's why the government has to take a different tack, and this government has an additional thing, as I mentioned, which I'll come to another slide anyway. One other aspect of the neoliberal economics of India that started around 1990, so it's 30 years old. Actually, this shows from 1980. Some aspects were creeping in from 1980 onwards, formally 89, but so this is going for about 34 years. So income grew because the economy grew, capitalist development of economy, less controls, so it grew. Foreign investments of different types came in. Internal investment increased because it's for profit. But look what has happened. The bottom 50% of the population income went up, nearly doubled, 89%. But the top 10% went 400%, and we went to top 1%, went 7.5 times, and so on and on, So you can see the rightmost line is basically the capitalist class of India. Their income went up 27 times. So this income equality is often, people say, well, India or China has, brought out 200 or 300 million people out of poverty. But that's a bourgeois concept. For the Marxist, we always talk about relative poverty. It's not a question of, so the working class has been rendered poor as compared and powerless more and more, both in India and the United States over this period of time. Okay, so that actually comes into thing that COVID-19 it doesn't discriminate as to who you are, but the social conditions discriminates. And if you're poor, if you live in congested places, have no access or little access to clean water, you have little or no access to health care, and you basically living, then you're more susceptible to the spread of the disease because it'll go there faster. You know, you can't stay away from other people. You can't stay without working. And that's true of people in the United States. As you know, I can afford to sit in my house. I'm retired. I have sufficient resources to isolate myself. But the person who delivers stuff to me from Amazon cannot do that. And so also the other people. Anyway, one factor I want to go into here is what BJP's rise to power has done, this Hindutva agenda ideology. As I've given this talk before about BJP's rise and what is this Hindutva ideology, I will not go into it, but it, in my opinion, anyway, let me go through the slide. Neoliberal capitalism followed the crisis of global capitalism that matured in 1970s. Indian workers had a high-level solidarity, a legacy, which was a legacy of anti-British struggle for independence, despite anti-Muslim prejudice that has been a feature of Hindu life fostered systematically by the British. But it has existed even before. British are not the only one. This is a thing that exists there, you know, because the two religions are different. The ruling class were Muslim. There was a resentment against, although ordinary people had nothing much to do with it, but that's how people live communally. So that prejudice was there. Now, the natural economy of India is a petty bourgeois economy. I know, you know, petty bourgeois economy is also the soil from which capitalism itself arises, okay? But petty bourgeois economy is not a capitalist economy. This is a notion that is mistaken even among Marxists. Some Marxists, they think petty bourgeois business is a capitalist business. It is not. This, along with the government-owned heavy industries, what the Congress was describing from 1947 to 89, which they developed, they called it socialism. Okay, you can call it socialism with Indian characteristic, if you like. And then it instituted the neoliberal reform, so-called reform. Modi's BJP represents the most aggressive attempt, in my opinion, of domestic capital in association with foreign capital to garner control over natural resources for exploitation. Develop capitalism as has China. This is their ambition of the Indian ruling class. But unlike China, where revolution and Maoism swept away the remnants of feudalism and its culture, BJP ideology is that of a reaction. It used Hindu prejudice and bigotry and religious obscurantism to gain power. So when it comes to dealing with COVID, all those become a disadvantage or it hinders effective dealing with this pandemic. By targeting 14 to 15% Muslims as outsiders, BJP has succeeded in breaking worker solidarity to a considerable extent by now. This is an ongoing process, as I said, for about the last 35, 40 years. Islamic revolution in Iran was a factor, and the US reaction to it, and further to oust the USSR from Afghanistan, you know, the Mujahideen and all that, that has played into the Hindu fear, and which helped BJP come to power. In India, that fear was, they used. Okay, so today, the mass media of India, which is corporate owned and a lot of right-wing Hindu dominating, they are calling all Muslims they're blaming all Muslims for the spread of coronavirus, which, as I've shown, is coming from multiple sources. Okay, now I will not go into detail of strategy adopted by Modi government to deal with it. One other thing Modi did was to put a lockdown. They squandered the time between the time they knew that it's coming to India and has come to India, and March 22nd, when Modi for the first time made, in his speech, made people aware that you have to do something. And March, just 2 days later, he put a lockdown on the country. Well, they were not ready to feed the people. In India, there are like 139 million, that is 20% of the workers in India are migrant workers. They come either from the same state, from villages, or from another state. So the lockdown left millions of workers without any support. They lost the job, no money, no food, shops were closed, and transportation was closed. So they took to foot. And some of them died, hungry, dehydrated, exhausted. The government belatedly tried to organize food, but it has been ineffective. I mean, I guess they have improved somewhat from that time. The lockdown in India is enforced not by an appeal only. It's enforced by security forces. The policeman can hit you with a stick or arrest and put you in jail, especially if you're poor. The hundreds of rural districts in several states of India, there is water shortage in summer. Drinking water is in short supply. How are you going to wash 10 times or 20 times a day? So lockdown will intensify this crisis. That's the other aspect of it. But lockdown is necessary also, because otherwise it will spread even faster. So you're caught between the devil and the deep sea. Lockdown was extended to May 3rd by Modi on April 15th. That was the day the first lockdown was to end. Now, Indian strategy is to seal off the hot spots where the virus has infected people. So they've divided the country into red, orange, and green zones. So the red zones are where you have this infection doubling in 4 days or less. The yellow is where it's doubling in more than 4 days, and green is where there is no infection found. So about 23% of the territory, 170 districts, are in red zone, which amount to 37% of the population. And this is a battle they're trying to fight to keep it from going into the final stage, which is community transmission. But I think some community transmission is already occurring. Especially in a state like Maharashtra, there is evidence the community transmission is taking place. So that is the big threat. There are several treatments approved for trials by Indian Council of Medical Research, which is ICMR in short. Plasma treatment, hydroxychloroquine, etc. And some treatments that have been developed in China, used in South Korea and Japan. Anyway, I will not go into that. China has supplied about 500,000 rapid test kits to India, and another 650,000 are on their way. But this in India is to use for surveillance purposes because they're not very reliable. So they go into red zone and do it to identify. They also sometimes do pool testing because these are expensive. So they'll take 5 people, sample of blood, mix it, test that. If 5 of them are clear, you just avoided 5 tests. If they are found to be infected, then they have to do all 5. So that means you do 6 tests. So in zones, I guess this is a good strategy to reduce the number of tests. Anyway, I think these strategies have been at least partially successful so far in slowing the spread of virus, okay? But it is still too early to say how far it will go. And it's a great threat in India right now because, as I said, the conditions are much worse than the United States. I mean, in New York City, you can see the disaster that took place in New York City. Now, there is an exception here, Kerala. I want to just mention quickly. This is where it started, but Kerala has had, healthcare system available to everybody within 1 kilometer. That means that you can walk up to a healthcare center. They don't have a doctor, but they have somebody of a nurse level, and they can identify, and then they arrange transport for you to be taken to hospital. They also have a tradition of educating the public. Everybody's literal there and on COVID-19. So they've taken the approach similar to what South Korea did, which is what Abhay Shukla has called the intensive approach, in which the whole community is involved in fighting the COVID threat. Whereas in the rest of India, largely Maharashtra, for example, where it is the highest number, they're taking what is known as restrictive approach, top down. You know, you use the police, you can't get out of your zones, and so on and so forth. So public is more passive there. And the South Koreans did this effectively, and so has Kerala. China's approach is somewhere in between, probably more towards restrictive type. But both are effective. I mean, to some extent, the Indian approach is effective so far. I will not go into stimulus package, but Modi has provided, because I'll be using up all the time. I don't want to use Mehmet as to go. We can discuss it in the question answer. Economic and political dimensions of COVID-19. Now, just like here, Modi will come up with a second stimulus. The first stimulus was intended for the very poor sections of society, including, as badly as it was done, also for the migrant workers. Economic activity will be partially relaxed from 20th April, but it will be based on case-by-case basis. For example, green zones will be free to continue full activity, partial in yellow zone, red be more restricted, and so forth. So that's their program. The agriculture sector has continued to perform, but there's a transport problem, right? So food is rotting, milk is being spoiled, and so forth. So there are problems, and this cannot go on. So therefore, that's the same situation in the United States, but in India, everything gets more intensified. So if you ask me, Modi has been supported by the masses, at least the upper sections, upper half or 3/4 have supported Modi. So he's supported even inside India, but also he's been given some credit by WHO for his approach. And judging from the result, it's either luck or so far it is just because it's early stage, the numbers favor Modi right now. So Modi is still a popular figure in India. So it's hard to predict the political outcome for the BJP. The left forces were weak, and their traditional organizing, which is mass organizing, cannot work in any case. So the picture is very unclear in the long run. And with that, I want to stop so that Mehmet could begin his presentation. Sorry if I took more time, Mehmet.
Oh, no, that's fine, Raj. If you don't mind,
I'm going there now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going there to, let's see. Okay, it says stop share. Okay, I've stopped sharing.
Okay, there you go. Now I'm gonna go and let's see. Okay, can people see the screen with the coronavirus pandemic, Turkey and beyond? Yes, no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see it. We can see it.
All right, good. Now, I'm going to be approaching the issue much different than Raj, and it's hard to follow, Raj's, footsteps in here, because he was very scientific and, put numbers and explained what was happening. I'm going to be looking at the political side of this and looking at what is happening. To tell you the truth, when doing this presentation, preparing for this presentation, this was one of the hardest ones that I prepared. The reason is that there used to be a time when I could distinguish between let's say, a neo-colonial or a third world country and contrast it to the audience here in the United States, so that they could understand the workings of how things get done in economies and systems like that. But as I have been, speaking, I think for years now on Turkey, and have been, also adamant that the United States has to, this is a decision made by the ruling classes at least, is that the United States had to become a third world country. I think what we are seeing is that. So I had very, very hard time distinguishing the events that's happening in Turkey or in the United States. I just recently, it got actually published today, wrote a very long article about the things that are going on in the United States, how this pandemic is being treated, how the whether the system can handle it or not. I mean, the first responses I got from there is that, hey, just change the names. You're talking about Turkey. This is not how it used to be before. So there are some changes. And these changes, I think, are brought on, triggered by this small virus that, I'm not going to blame it on the virus, but the changes that we are seeing is a worldwide change. I think, and that's going to be one of my themes today, is that we are in a different world. We are in a very different world than where we were 2 or 3 months ago. And that is scary. United States is rapidly becoming a third world country. And the third world, whatever you see, the corruption to, unpreparedness, to the ignorance, that is what you would expect to see in a country like Turkey. And we're going to go over those. But in order to go in, how has the world changed? What is actually changing? So I have here, unfortunately, this is all the way from the 19th century, the beginning of the Tale of Two Cities. And I can't find anything else that really describes our world today with these contradictions. The contradictions that are that seem to be non-resolvable in the conditions and the states that we are in. So yes, it is the best of times for somebody. What is the worst of times? And here we are, folks, sending rockets to to Mars for new colonies, and we are unable to find masks. And this is not only in Turkey, but this is also happening in the United States of America. And here we are. This is what we have come to. Even a small preventive measure is being challenged. In the picture, what you are seeing is from the right wing being challenged as being communist, but also the left has not stepped up to present another view. And so there are actually similar approaches to this, as I found both the left and the right very confused in this new state of affairs. And I'm going to say the same thing for the Turkish left and the Turkish right. We are struggling to find our ways in this brand new world. And it's not going to be easy. But the one trend that I can say about this brand new world is that I'm scared. So in a couple of months, what has changed is that, again, this is going to be another theme, is that our freedoms and rights that we think we have are being eroded by the minute. But that is not the scary part. The scary part is that we accept it. So we need to find, maybe in the question and answers and maybe in the future sessions, start thinking about where we stand on this. What can we do? Because the nature of the issues, the class war that we are so prepared to talk about or to organize and everything, that is being taken off the agenda. And here comes the biopolitical control of a society. It is no longer the capitalist class that is imposing, restrictions on ourselves and that. It is the coronavirus that's doing it. Are we prepared to counter this? So it's going to be very, very different. I've looked at some of the literature in Turkey because I wanted you to understand what the people are thinking about the affair. And a close friend of mine, actually, Ferda Koç, he's a doctor and he's an activist as well. He has put in together, and which I agree and will be repeating here, a kind of an approach that looks at the pandemic, or go beyond it, the development of microorganisms and these diseases that we are seeing and we will be seeing in the near future again and again, as being the part of the development course of humanity and capitalism. We are now taking it, as normal that we can't open the schools. We cannot visit our relatives except for the immediate family, that, the workplaces are going to be reorganized, folks. We are not going to have workers work next to each other and go to have a beer after the work, but they will be talking through their phones maybe, or, through protective masks. So we need to start thinking about, in terms of what we will be doing for organizing, for talking, for furthering our causes as they keep on chipping away on the things that we have. So going forward, I think we need to act now, because it's going to be too late soon. If you're gonna ask me what to do, I really don't know at this point, because this is new to me, new to the left. And people are thinking, really, everybody is confused, don't know what to do. So we are now facing a recurring pandemics. What does this mean? Because what we are seeing is that this was a very, very convenient matter that came in, and the ruling classes jumped on it. And we have no way of saying, no, you can't do this. We are scared, and we don't know what is, the medical establishment or scientists don't even know what is going on. The numbers that we are seeing, Raj showed some numbers, and every day we are seeing those numbers everywhere. I don't trust them, because there are so many different reasons of not trusting those numbers. There are political reasons. There are also medical reasons. those tests that they are giving, they are not reliable itself, the tests themselves. And then, the incapacity of the hospitals, and not telling, or even exaggerating, as some of the, let's say, conspiracy theorists are showing this. So it's a mess out there. But what is the reason for this mess? Why can't we just report on the truth and tell it as it is? Because of political reasons. We have a system that is based on lies. We have a system that relies and lives on lies, And like I'm going to show you later on, what measures are being taken if you were to talk about the truth, and why have we done this? How did we get here? It's not a natural development. First, we'll have to understand this. Yes, it's a microorganism and this and that, but there are certain times, there are certain social conditions when a microorganism can come in and do the devastation that we are seeing here. And this, what we can call as the biopolitical control, is what we have now, and this is what we are going to be seeing. We have seen in the 21st century four different pandemics: the Ebola pandemic, the SARS pandemic, the MERS, and the COVID-19. These are all microorganisms that originated in some animals, and they have mutated to infect humans as well. Now, this is going to happen, yes, naturally, but something else has changed for us to say that this is not a natural phenomenon, but it's a human-made disease. Now, when you look at all these and try to look at behind the scenes, what has occurred so that these microorganisms are jumping from animal kingdom to human kingdom, and it's causing this much devastation, is that we see two common threads here. One is the globalization of the proletarization. The world is now in such a capitalist development that nearly everybody everybody is proletariat. And the universalization of the commodification of capitalist production. Capitalist production has reached every corner of the globe, and it will not leave anything out, because that's the way capitalism lives. It has to expand. It has to make everything a commodity. And while doing that, it has to turn every single person to a proletariat. So this is I found this, again, just like the Charles Dickens quote, explaining what we have today from the manifesto. Modern bourgeois society, with its relations of production, of exchange, and of property, a society that has conjured up such gigantic means of production and of exchange, is like the sorcerer who is no longer able to control the powers of netherworld, whom he has called up by his spells. This is what we are seeing today. We have gone into, as I'm going to see, as I'm going to show, to every corner and have unleashed an attack on wildlife, on animals, the plants, the mountains, the waters, and everything, so that we are in constant full contact with them. So this increases, of course, the risk of these microorganisms to jump to us, because we are not letting it go. We are in there face to face. Now, proletarization is that, again, when we get into the expansion of capitalist mode of production, one thing that I think Raj also mentioned is that the change that's brought on to people who used to grow their own food and could sustain themselves, even if it's partly with their production in their villages and everything. Now, these people have been forced to abandon that kind of life, and they've been forced into centralized cities where their entire consumption is based on market. And this, of course, when we say, hey, they just buy everything on the market, it just doesn't stop there, because providing these commodities to the huge working class requires networks of roads, railroads, planes, carriers, marketing, stores. All of these things are so integrated. We are so in it that a simple microorganism, when it touches us, it becomes a huge, huge devastation. And just one more from the manifesto: the bourgeoisie, by the rapid improvement of all instruments of production, by the immensely facilitated means of communication, draws all, even the most barbarian nations, into civilization. The cheap price of its commodities are the heavy artillery with which it batters down all Chinese walls, with which it forces the barbarians' intensely obstinate hatred of foreigners to capitulate. It compels all nations, on pain of extinction, to adopt the bourgeois mode of production. It compels them to introduce what it calls civilization into their midst, that is, to become bourgeois themselves. In one word, it creates a world after its own image. I don't know what else explains the pandemic better than this. So we've talked about this, that we are into every single corner of the nature and are exploiting it to the full extent. And so we are in it, and that, of course, is going to cause many pandemics. But while when this pandemic hit, I've been hearing that this is the coronavirus crash, and coronavirus is the reason why we have unemployment and everything. That is wrong. Long time before people even heard the word COVID-19, there was an economic crash that was happening as it is. And I believe last week, Alan made a perfect presentation, and he explained the reasons behind it. I'm not going to go into details, as he has done it, and I can't even come close to what he's done. But we agree in general terms that capitalism itself cannot rid its own from crisis. It is ingrained in its DNA. If you have capitalism, you are going to have these crises coming. We expect after 4 to 7 years, and already in the 21st century, I think I put there 4. That's wrong. 3 big crashes that we have seen. Is that the first one in 2000, in the year 2000, to the .com crash, which was based completely on fictitious corporations and 20-year-olds just promising the world to investors and so on and so forth. So in 2008, we are more familiar with that, the subprime mortgage crash that devastated the world, and now what's called the COVID-19 crash. But we had these crashes coming along anyway. These were only the triggers, the what just pushed it off the edge to give it a name. But these crises are not because of the coronavirus, but we had the economic crisis in our hands before that. Now, how does this relate to Turkey and the coronavirus? Well, in order to even fight either the crash, the capital's crash, or the coronavirus, which it's hard to separate, but they are separate, but you can look at them as, feeding each other. And so when you look at Turkey, we have to understand that in order to react, in order to fight any epidemic or anything else, you need to have the ability to decide, ability to implement, to do stuff. And in neo-colonial countries that we have today, which I look at as many countries dependent on on imperialism, we do not even have this luxury of being able to look at something and decide that, hey, this is a epidemic coming and it's going to be devastating and it's going to kill our people. No, you can't do that. You are not able to, because you are so dependent that you can only decide twice removed from the upper echelons because of what's called dependency. And I want to again emphasize that dependency is not, I've heard from several people that they understand dependency as, oh, you know, such and such country, Turkey is dependent on Turkey. It's like a passive approach of, oh, Turkey doesn't have this, so Turkey depends on United States. No, it's not that. Dependency is a relationship, both-way relationship, where Turkey is made dependent. It is forcefully made dependent on a world where everything, including its money and its products and its labor, is only decided by the higher up bosses. So if we are going to be talking about the reaction to coronavirus and what is going on, we have to keep that very closely in our minds, that it's not just making a decision. There are many bosses to report to and to explain things before you can even open hospitals for people to get cured. Turkey, even back from 1923 on, it was a dependent country because it chose openly to take the capitalist road when Turkey was established, the new modern Turkey, let's say. But the dependency on imperialism is much older than that. Even in the Ottoman times, it was the Germans, it was the English. You had these dependencies which got carried over to modern Turkey. But what changed was the appearance. That the appearance was that it's dependent, and that it was now fighting the imperialist big powers, and it was able to develop by itself, and so on and so forth. But these are all the appearances. And the dependency of a country and its system invariably brings much more aggressive and vicious forms of control. And many people who have come to my talks before and to the discussions know that I define this as a neo-colonial type of fascism. The reasons, I'm going to go fast here, is that the reasons are that when in countries, metropolitan countries like France, Germany, United States, England, the workers are fighting over their surplus labor with one set of bosses, their own bosses. In Turkey, the exploitation is doubled. And this is, I'm saying Turkey, but it also covers the rest of the neo-colonial dependent countries, is that because the Turkish capitalists will have to pay also to the bosses in imperialist countries. Because of this dependency, Turkey cannot produce cars, guys. Turkey has car factories. Turkey has medicine factories, but it is not Turkish. Those products are not Turkish products. They are licensed. You pay for the license. The bosses pay for the license. The markets are well defined even before the factories are established on where they can sell, who they can sell it to. There are know-hows that the Turkish bosses will have to pay to the imperialist bosses on how to set up a factory, how to do production, and so on and so forth. So the bosses in between, the Turkish bosses, will have to exploit the workers so much that some part of it they can keep to themselves, but the bigger portion goes to the imperialist bosses. So the Turkish and the Kurdish working class has to be exploited much more to satisfy those two bosses. But as you can see, this means huge poverty. This means huge problems there. And people are not stupid. They can see what's happening as they grow more powerful. But if you don't have, like in the neo-colonial countries, the ability to cover up this with the tales of democracy and wanting to go to work and we are all in this boat together type of stuff, then the only thing that's left to keep the system going is brutal force, and that is the neo-colonial type fascism. Why am I harping on this? Because since the disappearance of the Soviet Union, even the metropolitan countries have started to understand why, it's unnecessary to keep the appearances of a social state. Why would you? Because the Soviet Union used to challenge the United States on human rights, on workers' conditions, on retirement, on every rights that we have, and tell the world, hey, look, I got better. I got better. So United States had to play the game. But now Soviet Union is gone. And the working class movement in the United States is nowhere near able to challenge this capitalist system that was bought in, after the 1930s, is that the working class is left toothless. So this is the day when the capitalists are going to squeeze us and attack us more. As you can see, the scared people, they say, is the easiest people to be controlled. And once we are scared of this so-called natural microorganisms, then it makes it very, very easy for the capitalists in the states to do exactly what they can do. And I want to also, I think Edward Snowden, if people watched his latest interview, he's cautioning as well on the very same thing. He says, the architecture of oppression, he calls it, architecture of oppression. This is what is being erected because we are scared. We are in our homes. We don't talk. We don't go out. How dare you? There are no demonstrations. So going back to the beginning of my presentation, I was talking about how the United States is becoming a third world country. This is what I mean. So now what you see, that colonial type fascism, and the distinguishing features of that fascism is that, let's not contrast it to 1940s Germany, because the parliament exists, opposition exists, the unions exist, the associations, you have demonstrations here and there. They don't mean anything. It's a show. When push comes to shove, they are being, forced. And in the United States and elsewhere, now we are seeing is that the coronavirus is being used to do that. We have talked about this. In Turkey, the relationship to imperialism really, really strengthened in 1980s. This is the time when the United States' preference for the entire region was moderate Islam. And it is by chance that Erdogan is ruling the country now, because Erdogan knew what the United States wanted, and he could deliver that. That's the so-called moderate Islam that was promoted by Paul Henze, which was the station chief of CIA in Turkey, that it was calling for the modern Islamic world, or the moderate Islamic world, where people wouldn't go into like terrorism or anything, but they would be Islamic, they would be, just praying and everything, nice guys. Well, it didn't turn out that way, which it couldn't. We're seeing moderate Islam in Syria today. We have seen it in Afghanistan. We have seen it in Iraq and everywhere. So the result of that change today is that you have, let me come back, the attack of the religious thought on secular and really scientific area was devastating. Just in the last 2 years alone, more than 6,000 professors have been fired from the universities because they do not toe the line of moderate Islam, or Islam per se. And all the lackeys and unbelievably ignorant people, you wouldn't even graduate from secondary school, are now teaching in universities. The only requirement for someone to be a professor is being religious. There are professors and the chancellors of universities who have never written a single goddamn paper, never published anything, and They keep on, but they pray 5 times a day. And these guys are now, determining the level of education in Turkey. So what comes from that is that today in the United States, we are talking about scientific coverage. Yes, just like, as opposed to Pence's, the fighting coronavirus, is that these professors, first of all, said that the, coronavirus is not going to affect Turkey. It will not, because we have belief in our God, and, Allah is going to protect us. Nothing can harm us. Then the other so-called, more secular professors in these universities came out and said, oh, the coronavirus is not fit for the Turkish DNA. We may expect to see 10, okay, let's give it 20 cases, and then it's gonna be gone, because our DNA is so strong, nothing can come to it. Well, we've seen the result, or we are going to see the result of that. So, Turkey, for a long time, even though there were, cases and deaths, Turkey completely rejected that Turkey had coronavirus well into March. The reason is Turkey has sold everything, privatized every single industry, everything that the people owned. There's nothing left in Turkey to sell anymore. The only thing that brings money is tourism. And just imagine in the middle of the tourism season, telling the world that you have coronavirus, especially the Russian tourists. I mean, they are the biggest chunk of people that come. So Turkey was completely ignoring it until one night, IMF and the World Bank said that they have funds to fight coronavirus. And that night, the day that IMF advertised they have money, Turkey said Turkey does not have the disease, but that does not mean Turkey does not have the disease. However, the disease may exist in Turkey also. So this is the approach we are seeing in fighting a pandemic. So I was very impressed by Raj's, explaining how the disease came into India, and we have the similar things. Right in the middle of a pandemic, Turkey allows tens of thousands of people to go to Mecca in Saudi Arabia to do their religious pilgrimage. Now, Turkey could not have prevented this. Why? Because the voting base for Erdogan is the religious groups. He has given them unbelievable both economic and political and social rights, where they are now. It's like the non-governmental organizations we have here. These religious sects are the ones who control the country, and they are the ones who have to push religious pilgrimages and other type of things you do on religion. So they could not be prevented. So tens of thousands went to Mecca, and when in a small sample of people that were tested coming back, many of them tested positive for the coronavirus. I think Raj also mentioned that some of the pilgrims from Saudi Arabia brought it to India. Now, the problem here is that, okay, you have, let me say one thing before getting there, is that Turkey was saying there are no cases in Turkey because, very simple reason, they don't say this, but then later admitted they weren't even testing. So were they lying? No, they did not test. So there were no cases, and Turkey did not have any case. So now, facing with this huge pandemic and these pressure from the people saying, what's going on in the world? We have to, these people coming from the pilgrim. So they did test. In a small percentage, they found some, many people that were infected. Now, what to do with it? What are you going to do? Here is your voting base, and you're gonna put them into quarantine. They only put a very small part of this coming pilgrims. One night, the student dorms at 3 o'clock in the morning, the police raids the student dorms, throws the women, young women and everyone on the street, and they clear out the student dorms and push the pilgrims in there. Well, the pilgrims didn't like it. They said that this was worse than the horse stables, where it tells them, you know, how the students are living. And you know what? They started escaping. They said that God protects me, Allah protects me, so nothing else will come. And who are you to put me in here? And a rebellion started, the Pilgrim Rebellion in Konya and other places. So they started breaking down the gates to escape, and the police and the guards came. So it was a beautiful sight to see, actually, that the pilgrims and the police fighting each other. But in the case, these nice old, you know, are religious, holy people. They started spitting at the police and the guards' face, saying, "Hey, if I am sick, you're gonna get sick too, if you don't let me go home." This was one thing. So we have thousands, tens of thousands of pilgrims that disappeared into their, homes and environment, that were either never tested or tested and could not be kept from the population in large. The second thing is that the only thing that's left in Turkey, not sold, but at least it's being privatized and it's being run by Erdogan's family funds, is the Turkish Airlines. I had to put this picture in here because, you know, it's a turnoff for the passengers to show a plane going down. But the only thing that's left with the Turkish Airlines is that with huge and tremendous government funding, the Turkish Airlines became the hub, and actually it is the #1 airline that flies to most places in the world, even to many African countries where sometimes the flight goes with 3 passengers. Now, is this economically viable? No, but it doesn't matter, because the operation is not an airline operation. Turkey, and specifically Erdogan, is in big other projects, especially eyeing Africa. He looks at Africa and the Middle East as his base, as he becomes the next caliph of Islam, the leader of it, like the Pope for the Catholics. So he thinks that by establishing these relationships with the African people and building mosques and helping them out with the Turkish tax money, is going to give him the caliphate that he's looking for with the Muslim populations of Africa. Now, this made Istanbul the biggest hub in the area, let's say Africa, Middle East, Asia. Turkey was flying, everywhere that you can think of. Now, that is also opening business opportunities for capitalists in Turkey that are very, very close to the ruling party, as they get projects to build roads, to build again mosques, to build schools in African countries in return for privileges and everything. But people have been talking that Turkish Airlines are flying these flights for other reasons, political, that are not being talked about. And as we have seen in Libya, in elsewhere, the world is getting much more than known cargo as arms shipments. Turkey is being used as the arms shipment hub for other parts of the world. So becoming a hub and carrying people from all over the world and not caring about quarantine or testing or anything, that was the second thing that brought largely to Turkey the virus. And
can I interrupt you?
Sure.
We're approaching 12, so can you wrap it up in about 4 minutes?
Let me go. So once the virus hit and we have accepted it, so the real face of fascism start to come up. As soon as the cases appeared, the first thing that came from the Turkish government, not from the health ministry, but from the interior ministry, where the police and the intelligence is that the social media accounts of all people who are posting about coronavirus will be tracked, and people not repeating the official information will be punished. This is word by word from the interior minister. And they have, up to now, hundreds of people have been detained, questioned for posting saying, oh, my neighbor shows some symptoms that may be, or something like that. But it was to go there. Then it became the the conspiracy of the other countries who are trying to destroy Turkey, that it was coming from the United States and Germany, these rumors and so on. So then the attacks started going on the journalists. Here is a journalist who was at midnight, his home was raided, and he got handcuffed and taken in because the paper that he works for published some information about coronavirus cases in the nearby hospitals, local hospitals. Now, this guy was in charge of the editor of the paper magazine, and the news was on the internet, so he was let go after the internet editor surrendered. Then this journalist was arrested because he showed solidarity with the journalists that got arrested. Then these journalists got arrested because they also said that local hospitals are seeing cases of coronavirus, but people are not talking about that. Then comes the economic downturn, is that the Ford manager of the Ford production unit in Turkey said, we are all going down together. Europe has stopped buying anything. All the orders are canceled when they were prepared to give, produce 10,000 trucks and so on and so forth. And the opposition started talking in the National Assembly saying that our health system is ready to collapse. We cannot handle such a thing. Why? Because of the privatization. The hospitals and the healthcare system is being privatized and nothing left, gutted out. And just like what Trump has done, there was the institution that monitored vaccines, that made vaccines, that made medicine. It was closed down because it was deemed unnecessary. Then the doctors started to speak, and they were saying that they were being threatened if they were by both the private and the government hospitals on reporting anything about the coronavirus that contradicted the government's line. This professor, the doctor professor, was teaching her students on how to fight coronavirus. And just because she said, oh, we are hearing many cases that is not being acknowledged, the government and the university called her for questioning, and the next day she had to go and apologize for the things she said and that she didn't mean it. The person who drew this cartoon was arrested because it showed that the mind of a religious person was not equipped to fight with the coronavirus. This journalist reported on a remote village that people were, getting sick all over the place, and immediately he was arrested. And just few weeks later, the entire area that he's in had to be put on quarantine. And apart, like we are seeing stimulus checks and everything, that's what we expect the Turkish government to do. Well, you know what they did? They came and gave the bank number of the government and asked people to pay for the fighting of coronavirus. And this student mocked it, and he got arrested. And this journalist made fun of government wanting people to pay for the fight, and because he joked about it, he got arrested. So now the government started to come in, and they banned any kind of meeting, any kind of distribution of leaflet, any press release, everything that is now being deemed illegal. Then the bosses started started hiring goons. And if the workers refused to go to production because many other workers tested positive, then the goons started attacking the workers, forcing them back to production. And the doctors started showing that there's a racial divide in this also. There are only three centers in Turkey, all in the white Turkey, let's say, part of it that do the testing. Not a single testing environment in the Kurdish areas. And the contradictions goes on and on. We can speak for days, but the health workers are not now being allowed to even resign from their positions. I don't know how that's going to be enforced, but as they are banned from resignation, the hospitals are firing them. Just one last thing, just to show you the mayhem that this caused and the Turkish government's inability to even approach a solution, is that just like the United States, what is important is the capital's production must go on and people's lives be damned. So Turkey is faced with this. Either people are going to be going back to their homes and not producing, saving their lives, or they're going to be forced to production. So caught in this dilemma, on a Friday night, 10 o'clock Friday night, the Turkish Interior Minister declared that there was a curfew. Nobody could leave their home for the weekend. So that caused huge mayhem as people rushed on top of each other, pushing and shoving and everything to buy bread for the 2 days that they were going to be locked in. And so come Monday, everybody was set go, and from this mayhem, the Interior Minister resigned. But it was a game because Erdogan did not accept his resignation, so he's back there. And now what the Turkish government is doing here, this fall, is that it's only on the weekends people are locked in home because they think that during the weekday, the virus doesn't, infect people. So I'll go in on other things in the question and answers, but this is just to show you the inability to react to a pandemic that is causing havoc all over the place.
Okay, thank you, Mehmet. So I'll ask Alan to be the, Alan, could you be the moderator? But before Alan comes on moderator, Jean, do you have very short announcement because we are running out of time? Go ahead, do a short one so that we can have some questions.
Yes, I will begin by reminding everybody that down at the bottom of your screen, there's a reactions place. And if you want to give this talk a thumbs up, you can. So just one way of reacting and giving our speakers the applause they so richly deserve. Now, we do have some programs coming up. Next week, we have our comrade Sharat Lin. We'll be talking, the topic will be the COVID-19 pandemic, apocalypse or opportunity. And he will be saying a more optimistic view, even though it can very well be an apocalypse, it may well be an opportunity for us to establish better things. And that will be on our mailing and on our webpage soon. Going on down, we have 2 more programs lined up. We're not sure which order they'll be in. One, I've contacted the Sunrise Movement, who are doing a lot of things on, they were very active these days. And the tentative title will be The Sunset Folks Meet the Sunrise Movement, because we need to hear from youth in all this. And also I have a program dealing with socialism, namely Keep the Burners Burning. We know the only kind of socialism we see in the United States at this time is Bernie-style socialism, and we need to have a discussion on that. And I'm hoping to invite some more people, including a youth, a young person, by which I mean under 40, hopefully. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Raj.
Okay, so Alan, would you please be the moderator? Is that okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. And
I don't
so,
think I'm. I don't think I've been given.
Yeah, I just gave you.
I don't think so, but okay. Wait.
Yeah,
you got the control?
Okay. All right. So basically, I do this from the participants window.
exactly.
Okay. Anybody?
So you raise hands, right? So
Yeah.
you know
Raise
how
your
people,
hand.
either they can raise the hands if the camera is on,
Yeah.
or they can do,
I
go
raised
ahead,
my
Ellen,
hand.
you tell them what to do.
Okay, Charlie. Why don't you go ahead?
Yes, thank you very much, both of you. Couple points. One is that the public health response to this virus around the world has not broken down as capitalism versus socialism. Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, and Vietnam all achieved results as good or better than China. And these are capitalist countries. Of course, we have plenty of capitalist countries who have had disasters led by the US, United Kingdom, as well as Italy, Spain, and others. But what we can observe is that some of the countries near China learned from its 2003 cover-up of the SARS virus and prepared for next time. The health officials in Taiwan heard unofficially through travelers back and forth of a new strain of coronavirus, didn't know exactly what it was, on December 31st of last year, and they took immediate action. They were going from then on onto every plane arriving from Wuhan and assessing every passenger before that plane unloaded. So there are some other factors of that. Now, the more general point is that we hear this dilemma posed. Either you stay healthy, but you suffer economic ruin, or you go back to work and the pandemic keeps going. And here I think there is a dividing line between capitalism and socialism. It is a dilemma. That dilemma does exist in capitalist countries, but a socialist country can, one, go back to work with rigorous safety measures. Now, something like social distancing requires more space, so therefore you can only use offices, schools, etc., at partial capacity. So you can't bring all the workers back to their original jobs, but you can put workers on work that needs doing: parks cleanup, trimming, blanket testing up and down every street for the virus, etc. Now, there is a cost, of course, for a pandemic in this, and that is you'd have to accept smaller profit and a lack of some consumption items for the duration, which is something that socialism can do and capitalism can't. So I just wanted to make those two general remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Other hands up? I don't see any hands raised.
Roger Harris.
Roger Harris. Yeah. Let's see, let me unmute you. Or I don't think I can.
Yeah, you can. Yes, you can.
Okay.
Just do a, if you hover over it, there's that unmute.
I'm actually, yeah, okay, got it.
Am I on now?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, good. Thank you, and thank you for the speakers. Mehmet, you mentioned that there was global proletarization, and I was wondering what you meant by the proletariat, because at least, usually Marxists talk about the proletariat as the industrial working class, people who are wage earners in industry. And if that's the case, I don't think that's the trend we're seeing right now. I just looked up the FAO statistics. It says that 60% of the world population is still in agriculture. Most of that is peasant agriculture. And there's also a very large growing informal sector in a lot of economies. I mention this because it's not really a technical point, but it has a political point. And that is that there's increasing numbers of what we might call people that are outside of the global economy and are in effect viewed by the imperialist and capitalist as a surplus population. But they're of course not surplus population. They are the people, and they're the people that we must support. So I thought maybe you might want to address that.
Just to mention, I have to look at those figures as well. But you mentioned also what you call unregulated, people who are not counted as the regular workforce.
Right, the informal sector.
Informal sector. I mean, that is huge in Turkey as well. And but they are working mostly for like the factories, and so they are wage workers. What I'm seeing from the population in Turkey, and mostly they are Syrians and refugees have taken that position now, but I would still consider them as wage earners. You're right. There's still some people out there that are doing agriculture, but agriculture, I still have to look at that. Is that agriculture is a capitalist enterprise as well. Working in agriculture does, but if there are people independent and they are still doing the peasant work, I don't see that they will continue far with that. I don't know, because as we have seen, all those people coming to cities, and cities are bustling with people. Where are they coming from?
I would like to add to this a little bit. I agree substantially with Mehmet that on this, the people who are eking out a living at the fringe of society, like 90% of the workers in India are non-unionized workers, but they're workers. And whether you do a piece work or you are within the proletarianization process of capitalism. They're not surplus population, they're the reserve army of labor. And that puts the pressure on the workers who are in factories. And this is what happened in the United States when jobs shifted to China. So it is, I think it's still proletarianization, although, even in the United States, the preeminent capitalist country, there are 30 million small businesses, mom and pops, or even single person businesses. And they are driven towards proletarianization, but they are petty bourgeois things. So the petty bourgeoisie does exist. But Mehmet's point is its drive towards proletarianization, not that it is reached there, but that's what it's taking. I agree with that.
Other questions? I don't see any official hands raised. If you want to do it by video, raise your hand. I can call on you. Anybody? Speak up. Other questions? Comments?
So Mehmet and I have done such a great job. There are no questions.
No questions.
I'm not
Well,
seeing it.
maybe if I may just add something I wasn't able to mention, there is that I mentioned two things. One is the pilgrimage, the other one is the Turkish Airlines, and but there is other things as Roger brought up, the refugees. That's the third, let's say, the largest number of people who are not tested but cross borders, especially coming from Iran. Every day, thousands of people, if not thousands, let's say hundreds of people, pass the border from Iran to Turkey, and they come in with no tests and everything. And we know that Iran has had this, share of the issues there, and also from Syria. So that is also open border, let's say, where people cross in and out, and that's another source I couldn't mention in the presentation.
Okay, Norma.
The whole,
Norma?
Hello. Hello. I just a nag, a complaint about the universe. As maybe we've just been shut up by this virus and really, frightened and not knowing what to do. All those tentative things that are being worked on. And we're quiet as a result. It's horrible.
I mean, we are having, discussions on whether the Constitution should be, revisited or, being frozen, and nobody makes a noise. That is the scary part.
I think I have a little different point of view on the pandemic than perhaps Mehmet. Not that I disagree with most of what he's saying. He's taken a higher level philosophical view of it. But I think the pandemic has a life of its own. I don't think this is a going on and on. The fact that the different ones come up, that's the point, Mehmet's point. I perfectly agree. But this one will die out probably in 3 or 6 months because you see the decay, even in Italy, as sharply as it rises, it decays. And that is not fully understood. I was trying to talk to some friends. Why does it decay so rapidly? Because it rises very rapidly, but then it decays very rapidly. And that's a complex question, but it will go away, but life will not return to normal. I agree with Mehmet, and there is the question of, we reached a point where, hollow as it is, this colossus, as I'm using the title words of Charlie's excellent book, The Hollow Colossus, the automation, where this capitalism has brought the world is either to its extinction or overthrow of capitalism at this point. And the question is, how will capitalism disappear? Because we are seeing evidence that wherever there is a social response, communist-based response, the fight against this is better. But the very fact it is coming out repeatedly out of the processes that are capitalist processes pressing human beings against nature. This is the conundrum. This is the 6th stage of capitalism that we're in.
May I bring
go ahead.
another issue? Oh, sorry, Al.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Mehmet.
Yeah, I want to bring in another issue that, again, I mentioned Snowden here. New forms of, as he calls it, the architecture of oppression. We are seeing that the usage of this pandemic is going well beyond just, working together or something. And this had been going on for some time. And as the author, I forgot her name now, but, surveillance capitalism has shown, and Snowden just, repeated that, is that now we are giving away our very fundamental rights to corporations who are so-called pretending to protect us from this menace by, let's say, they tell us that if we have been in the proximity of somebody who has the virus. So how do they know this? Is the other thing. I mean, are we giving away all our privacy? Because your phone constantly tells the corporations where you are, and they take this, they map it, they time it, and then they contrast it to other people's phones and their proximity, and somebody must have entered who has the virus, who's labeled with that virus, and so they can now say, hey, you came like 20 feet close to somebody, and so you have the the potential to become sick. So are these techniques that were there and we resisted them becoming the norm now? Are we willingly giving away the things that we resisted just because, there's a virus and we are scared about it? So I want to hear people's, thoughts, and also what to do, how to fight this trend.
Sharon?
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing that Mehmet referred to. I think that's one of the most scary things that has been revealed by events in the last few weeks. We knew that we had given up our privacy, that you know, everybody is just accepting that we use Zoom, but they are recording everything that we're doing. And I think we really, really need to address that. Those of us who try to organize the mass movements of all different kinds, and going forward, we really need to figure out how we can use technology to thwart their technology. And unless we do that, there'll be no organizing a general strike or mass demonstrations or anything without them knowing each and every person who is there. And that just, you know, will undermine our efforts. So our technology, the people's technology, has to be greater than the man's technology, and that's going to be a long struggle. But we should definitely not ignore that, in my opinion.
Other questions? I don't see
I
any
just want
hands
to make
up.
a comment that when the revolution came, the telegraph technology was used by the Bolsheviks just as well. So all the things that are being developed to control us also could be turned around. So I don't think the revolution will stop because of the technological control. It will not become that we'll all be controlled, because the people who are working in them, once they're convinced that this system is killing them, they're not going to be allies. So I don't see quite this dark view of the future.
Oh, absolutely. I was not trying to say that we're doomed because of that. We just have to pay attention to it.
Okay. Charlie wants to.
Charlie, would you like to?
Just a brief thing following up on what Sharon said. You know, there's already alternatives to Zoom. Some of us have tried a thing called Jitsi Meet, JITSI-MEET. And it's more or less an open source project, which you may have one or another view, kind of libertarian, socialist or libertarian capitalist combinations among technicians. And apparently it's encrypted from end to end. So at least it's a little more difficult for the spy agencies to get into it, and takes them a little more time of their resources if they really think they need to hear what we've been saying today. That's all.
I've looked at not Jitsi, but I've read a little bit about Jitsi, because that was being, you know, as we were considering it as an alternative, and which may still be. As I read from it, I understand that, like Charlie said, it's an open source, which means that it is available for developers to take that and develop around it. And there's a company, if I'm not mistaken, in San Francisco or in the Bay Area called 8x8. They are using the Jitsi technology. They built around it and they made a product. But let's remember that these are also corporations. And where do they make their money from? You know, these technologies. It's just like, you know, Verizon or Google or Facebook. It's not that the spy agencies are going to come in and listen. It's just that those corporations who are controlling the product themselves provide it to the spy agencies or the security agencies or whoever wants to. You know, it's all for money and access to the government resources. So it's going to be a little tough, I think, to be able to compete with what's, you know, with their trillions of, you know, dollars of investment and technology development. We need to find a solution, but I don't know how at this point.
We have a telephone, 282-9408. If you would like to, you have your hand raised? No? Okay, I don't see that person.
Charlie has a hand.
No. 282-9408 has your hand up, but
they need to unmute themselves. And I think Charlie's hand is up also.
Yes.
Okay, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so somebody should know, write the damn number down. My phone number is 9408. Everybody I know on this thing has got my name, my number on it. So I know it's tricky. Okay, so my wife is sitting
What's
next
your
to me.
name?
Hello, no, sorry, this is Rich Johnson. You know who I am.
Oh, no, yeah, right, no, but yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. Okay, so Kit is sitting here, and she would like to talk. She's not registered under her own name, which we have to do, but she has something she wants to say. So, Kit.
Hi, this is Kit. I think the reason it's hard to discuss this issue is because it is overwhelming. The fear is real. The bad news is a lot, but we also need to balance that. And I think next week it'll happen when we talk about the apocalypse versus opportunities. But I do want to mention that there is hope, and we have to be the ones that keep the hope alive. And also, I want to mention that there are positive things happening in the U.S. I can't speak for Turkey or in India, although I do want to know what the green zones are in India. But I know that locally, particularly in California, I mean, the coronavirus seems to be more of a serious issue in areas that are highly concentrated populations. And I know, like in Northern California, it's like there's less than a handful of people that have been reported with the disease, whereas like in Oakland, Alameda County, you know, our numbers are about as equal as San Francisco and even greater in south of us. And I heard word from a friend of mine who lives in Dahab that, you know, he's from London, but he lives in Dahab. He said they only have a very small number of people with the infection, whereas in Cairo, it of course is very dangerous there. So I think, you know, it's I think the numbers are also telling us that more people will survive this disease. That unfortunately, we are seeing deaths occurring, and in this country, we're seeing it in like New York City, where they're just overwhelmed. But you know, I think as communists, we have to have a bigger overview and a historical overview of this whole thing, where it's going to be down the line. You know, we'll look back and we'll see what the result has been. Right now, we're living through a historical movement, and who knows who in our own circles will survive this thing. I am a bit worried. I have to go back to work myself, and I don't know. I feel that the county is not handling this very well either, but people are doing the best that they can given the knowledge that they have. But if it were up to me, I would stay home and hunker down. But, you know, I'm going to be running out of leave, so I can't stay home. Anyway, that's what I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
The green zone in India, if you're asking about that, are areas or the districts where no case of coronavirus has been.
She's asking where it is.
Oh, they're spread over India. These are basically areas that have not large areas of concentrated population, but they exist in every state or nearly every state. Maharashtra, where Mumbai is, and Delhi, which is a state by itself, but surrounding areas, Delhi, these are the areas where people come by airplanes, which is a major mode of transport these days for people. So the spread happens from there, and they live in proximity, a lot of poor people. So those are the areas, but there are many states in India where they have very few cases of coronavirus, and they count by districts, okay? Within district also, they have areas that they cordon off. So the green areas are the areas which are neither red, which means the infections doubling every 4 days or less, or yellow, where it is doubling, but it's taking more time. Green is where they haven't found any evidence. So they'll start the economic activity in the green zones first, and it's flexible. If they develop some cases there, then they will say they will also stop it. It's a very measured approach they're taking in India.
Charlie, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a brief technical thing back to Mehmet. This Jitsi platform is open source. And then, as Mehmet mentioned, there's a commercial company that is spun off. But there's also a non-commercial Jitsi Meet, Jitsi Meet. I've actually used it, and it's quite simple to use. I mean, that's proved because I've used it. And so you can go to Jitsi Meet, and it's not hard to be a host, not hard to join, not hard to use. And as I say, it's supposed to be encrypted end-to-end. But Mehmet's right in that you have to be careful and look at the spin-offs and which have become commercial and which are still maintained as something else. That's all.
Thanks, Charlie. And I took a note of that. I'll take a look at that too. Thank you very much.
The URL is Jitsi, JITSI.org. Other questions, comments? I think it's 12:30.
Well, okay, is there a raised hand I saw, Martis, or no? That's just excellent. No. Okay. All right. Well, has anybody heard about how Karen is doing? Because she had Karen Stewart, who...
Well, she was on this call for a while.
She was?
Here she is.
Oh, Karen is here? Still
Not on
here?
right now.
Do
Not right
people know who the
Well,
people
Karen
we
is
are
here.
not
Yes,
familiar with
Karen, how are you doing? How's
there
your
you
health?
are.
I wanted to ask Karen.
There's a lot of a number of people that we haven't seen participant with us before. Does any?
Karen, how are you doing, Karen? Just wanted to ask you. Okay, Karen's not responding. Okay.
So what I'm asking is, we should say something to the people that we don't know, or something. Is who do people who are Mehmet or Raj? Do you know who these people are? Marty and Dev and Sun. Well, I've seen Sandeep's name before.
Yeah. Yes. Sandeep has even spoken at the library. He's given, I think, a talk or two. Dave is a part of a friend of mine who's part of a Capital Reading Group, and I've known him for 45 years or so.
We have another hand up,
Yes.
570-0259.
Two hands up, actually. One is obviously of Rich, but the other.
Yeah, 570.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's Marty. My Wi-Fi dropped, so I get the picture and then I call on the phone.
Oh, okay.
And I'm with Veterans for Peace. I'm on the national board, and Jean's been sending me the Sunday schedule for a long time, and I finally figured out how to make sure that I got it. So hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, Marty.
Hey.
Thanks for coming. Good to have you with
Yep.
us.
Do we know Van Moore?
Hi, Alan here. Good presentation. Bye.
Or Gyazgam?
That's my wife, Gulden.
I don't think we have to go through,
Yeah.
if people don't want to introduce themselves, that's fine.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I
Sharon.
wanted
Yeah.
to,
Sharon.
Eric Montag.
Well,
people-
I think
well-
Sharon just made I think Sharon's right that if people want to say something, they can raise their hand.
I thought we say hello. It was nice to hear from
Yeah.
Marty.
Okay.
Where can we go on YouTube to hear this presentation again?
We're planning on, formatting it and everything, and I'm going to try to put it up before tonight, and I'll let Gene know so that he can put it on to the ICSS Marxist website. And Raj may put
What about
it on.
last week's presentation?
I think it's already there.
What about last week's presentation?
Eugene, I think it's already there. Eugene?
Last week's presentation was emailed out to the Sunday Morning at the Marxist Library list. If you didn't, you're probably not on the list. So we're going to be working on that list, trying to.
I think he's talking about the recording.
Yes, it's on the website. How can I access the last week's presentation?
It's on YouTube, right?
Yes.
More details, can you give him more details?
Yes, YouTube where? On YouTube.
YouTube, go to ICSS Marxist.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Is it possible to have my phone number taken off of whatever gets put out on the internet?
I think if you call up, if you contact Zoom and go over it with them, re-register or register more fully so that your name appears, and well, your name is up, but anyway, talk to them, I think.
I'll take a look if I haven't noticed, not that I know. Does the participant list show in the video? I'm not so sure. If it doesn't, then you're okay. If it is, then...
In the gallery view, it shows up if they've dialed in by phone. I don't know if there is a way to change your ID under your participant. So I don't know if you can do that. You can do that by, I've never dialed in, but if you go to the participants icon and open that window and you click on your line, you can redefine your name, rename yourself. But I don't know, I guess if you're on a phone, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So you might want to try to get a computer or a smartphone connection to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Can anybody hear me? This is Alan.
Yes.
Hello?
Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. I just want to know if people can hear me. Great presentation. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Okay, looks like we're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
So next week, same time?
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Will be speaking.
Thanks.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.